License and registration, now.
With all due respect, officer, you haven't provided any legal justification for this stop. What was the reason?
Step out of the car. Hands where I can see them.
The heavy scent of sterilized latex and antiseptic still clung to his scrubs. Dr. David Miller ran a hand over his tired face, the low hum of his Lexus a familiar comfort as he turned onto the quiet, tree-lined street he called home. 5:15 p.m. The afternoon sun, a warm honey gold, filtered through the oak trees, casting long shadows across perfectly manicured lawns. After 12 hours wrestling with complex prescriptions, counseling anxious patients, and managing a pharmacy staff through a punishing rush, this was his sanctuary. The final 100 yards. The garage door was already rising in response to his clicker, a silent welcome. He slowed the car, ready for the satisfying crunch of tires on his own gravel driveway. That's when the world fractured. Two blinding strobes of red and blue erupted in his rearview mirror, painting his car's interior in a chaotic, pulsating light. A siren chirped twice, a sharp, commanding sound that felt like a violation in the evening stillness. David's foot hit the brake instinctively. He glanced back. A county sheriff's patrol car, white and black, had pulled up directly behind him, blocking him in. He was already on his property line, the front wheels of his Lexus technically in his driveway. Before we go any further, I want you to ask yourself a question. Have you ever felt completely safe 1 second, and then had that safety stolen from you for no reason at all? Drop your answer in the comments. And subscribe to this channel, because what happened in the next 17 minutes, captured on a single smartphone, is a masterclass in why you should always know your rights. The patrol car's door swung open. The deputy who emerged was young, maybe late 20s, with a military-style haircut and a palpable sense of aggression radiating from him like heat off asphalt. His hand was already resting on the butt of his sidearm. He strode towards David's window, his boots loud on the pavement. David, a man who had built his life on precision and calm, pressed a button on his console. The engine went silent. The window glided down. "Evening, officer, is there a problem?" David's voice was even, professional, the voice of a man who spent his days explaining the difference between amoxicillin and azithromycin. The deputy, whose name tag read Richards, stared at him. His eyes swept over the Lexus, the brick house, and then settled on David. A black man in expensive scrubs driving a luxury car in this neighborhood. In Richards's mind, a switch flipped. A conclusion was reached before a single word of explanation was offered. "License and registration," he said. Not a request, a demand. His tone was flat, devoid of courtesy. David's training wasn't from an academy, but from a lifetime of experience. He knew this script. "With all due respect, officer, I haven't committed any traffic violation. I've already pulled into my own driveway. Could you tell me why you've stopped me?" Richards's jaw tightened, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He wasn't used to being questioned. "I said, let me see your license and registration, now." "You are required to have reasonable suspicion to pull me over. I was driving under the speed limit and signaled my turn correctly. So I ask again, what was the reason for this stop?" David's heart was beating faster, a steady thrum against his ribs, but his voice remained a bedrock of calm. He wasn't being defiant, he was being correct. This was the moment of decision. This was the fork in the road. Instead of de-escalating, Richards doubled down. "Failure to comply with a lawful order is a crime. Are you refusing to show me your license?" David took a slow breath. He reached for the phone mounted on his dashboard, his movements deliberate. He tapped the screen. The small red light of the video recorder blinked on. He angled it slightly to capture both himself and Officer Richards in the frame. "For the record," David said, his voice now addressing both the officer and the lens, "I am not refusing a lawful order. I am asserting my Fourth Amendment right. You have not provided any legal justification for this stop. I am on my own property, and I am now recording this interaction." Officer Richards stared at the phone. He saw the red light. For a fraction of a second, a different man might have recognized the precipice he was standing on. A different man might have seen the lawsuit taking shape. the internal affairs complaint being written. But Richards saw only disrespect. He saw a challenge to his authority, and he couldn't let it stand. "Step out of the car," he commanded, his voice dropping an octave, laced with menace. "Hands where I can see them." The sun was still shining. The birds were still chirping in the oak trees. David's neighbors were probably starting to cook dinner. And here he was, being ordered out of his car in his own driveway, under the glare of flashing lights, by an officer whose pride had just been wounded. The sanctuary had become a cage. The next 17 minutes would feel like a lifetime, and it would cost the county $18 million. To understand what happened in that driveway, you have to understand the two men at its center. Let's start with Dr. David Miller, 42 years old, doctor of pharmacy from Johns Hopkins, owner of 3 independent pharmacies in the city, employing 28 people. But that's just the resume. The real story is in the community. For 10 years, David has run a free Saturday morning clinic out of his flagship store, providing blood pressure screenings and diabetes management counseling to low-income residents who can't afford regular doctor visits. He started a mentorship program for at-risk high school students, personally guiding 6 of them into pharmacy school on full scholarships. When the city's budget cuts threatened the local youth center, David organized a fundraiser with other small business owners, raising over $200,000 to keep its doors open. He sits on the board of the local hospital and the Chamber of Commerce. David Miller's name wasn't just known in his community, it was respected. He built things. He healed people. He didn't just live in the city, he was a part of its foundation. He earned his Lexus. He earned his house in that quiet, leafy neighborhood. He earned it not through inheritance, but through 16-hour days, through meticulous care for his patients, through a relentless drive to give back to the place that gave him his start. He was the American dream personified. And that afternoon, he was just a man trying to get home to his wife and have dinner after a long day of serving the very community Officer Richards was sworn to protect. Now let's talk about Deputy Kyle Richards. 29 years old, 5 years with the county sheriff's department. On paper, his record was spotless. No official reprimands, no sustained complaints. But paper can hide a lot. If you dug deeper into the sealed records of the Internal Affairs Division, a pattern emerged. 3 civilian complaints in 4 years, all dismissed for insufficient evidence. 2021. A black lawyer driving a vintage convertible pulled over for an improper lane change. Detained on the roadside for 30 minutes while Richards ran his license, his plates, his credit history, looking for something, anything that would stick. Nothing did. The complaint was filed and buried. 2022. A black real estate agent showing a home in a wealthy, predominantly white neighborhood. A neighbor called in a suspicious person. Richards was the responding officer. He held the agent in handcuffs on the front porch for 20 minutes, in full view of her clients, until her identity was confirmed. The complaint was filed, and a supervisor issued an informal verbal counseling that was never documented. 2023. A black professor from the local university jogging through a park. Richards stopped him, claiming he matched the description of a robbery suspect. The description was for a man a foot shorter and 50 pounds heavier. The professor was questioned, his ID demanded, his gym bag searched on a park bench. The complaint went nowhere. 3 incidents. 3 black professionals, all in places Richards' internal bias told him they didn't belong. And every time, he walked away without a mark on his official file. The system was designed to protect him. The union protected him. The insufficient evidence stamp was a get-out-of-jail-free card. People in the community knew his car. They knew his name. They knew to have their hands on the wheel and their voices low when he approached. Should an officer with a pattern of bias-based stops, even if they're officially dismissed, be allowed to patrol alone with full arrest powers? Comment yes or no below. That afternoon, Richards wasn't responding to a call. He was on proactive patrol, cruising. He saw the Lexus, a symbol of wealth. He saw David Miller, a black man behind the wheel. And in his mind, The equation was simple. Car plus driver equals suspicion. It wasn't conscious. It was a reflex, a prejudice so deeply ingrained he didn't even recognize it as bias. It was just a feeling, a gut instinct. The same instinct that led him to stop a lawyer, handcuff a real estate agent, and search a professor. He didn't see a pharmacist, a community leader, a mentor. He saw a target, and he had no idea that this time the target was going to fight back with a weapon more powerful than his badge and gun, the unblinking, objective truth of a video camera. Step out of the car. The command hung in the air, sharp and cold. David Miller looked from Officer Richards's face to the red light on his phone. He knew this was the critical point. Complying with an unlawful order could be interpreted as consent. Resisting could get him hurt, or worse. So he chose a third path: calm, documented compliance. "Officer, you have ordered me out of my vehicle," David said, his voice steady, narrating for the camera. "I am complying with your order under duress, as I believe it is unlawful. I do not consent to any searches of my person or my vehicle." He opened the door slowly, his hands in plain sight. He stood up, a man of average height but immense composure, and faced the deputy on his own driveway. The flashing lights of the patrol car painted stripes of red and blue across his house, a grotesque light show for an audience of one. A neighbor across the street, an elderly woman named Carol, who David had helped with her prescriptions just last week, peered through her blinds, her face a mask of concern. "Turn around. Place your hands on the roof of the car," Richards barked. David complied. The metal of the Lexus was still warm from the engine. He could feel the deputy's presence behind him, could hear the rustle of his uniform, the clink of his gear. This was humiliation, pure and simple. Being treated like a common criminal a few feet from his own front door. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Richards began the interrogation. The question itself was an accusation. "I live here," David replied, his voice muffled against the car's roof. "This is my house." "I'm going to need to see some proof of that." "My identification is in my wallet, in my right back pocket. My address is on my driver's license. You asked for it a moment ago." The logic was impeccable. The absurdity, profound. Richards didn't reach for the wallet. He was enjoying this. He was in control. "Lot of car for a pharmacist," he said, the words dripping with insinuation. "You guys must be doing pretty well for yourselves these days." This was the core of it, the poison. It wasn't about a traffic violation. It was about a black man whose success Richards couldn't comprehend as legitimate. The Lexus, the house, the quiet neighborhood. In Richards's worldview, these things had to be the product of something illicit. David didn't take the bait. He didn't get angry. He just stayed silent. His silence was a weapon. It was a mirror, reflecting Richards's own bigotry back at him. And the camera was recording it all. The interrogation continued. "Where are you coming from? Where do you work? Do you have anything illegal in the vehicle? Have you ever been arrested?" The questions were a fishing expedition, a desperate attempt to find a justification, retroactively, for the illegal stop. Each question was met with a calm, factual answer. "I'm coming from my pharmacy. I have nothing illegal in my car. No, I have never been arrested." At the 10-minute mark, Richards seemed to realize he had nothing. He hadn't seen a crime. He hadn't found a discrepancy. All he had was a man who knew his rights and a phone that was recording his every word. His frustration mounted. "You know, people who have nothing to hide don't act like you," Richards said, trying a new tactic. Psychological pressure. "They're cooperative. They show their ID when I ask for it. Your attitude is what's making you look suspicious." David finally turned his head slightly, his cheek resting against the cool metal of his car. "Officer, asserting my constitutional rights is not suspicious. It's the act of a citizen. Your refusal to provide a reason for this stop is what's unlawful." Checkmate. The sound of another car pulling up made both men look. It was David's wife, Sarah, a successful architect arriving home in her own car. She saw the flashing lights, her husband pressed against his own vehicle, and a wave of ice-cold fear washed over her. She parked, got out, and immediately took out her own phone and started recording from a second angle.
David, what's going on?
She called out, her voice trembling but firm. "Stay back, ma'am," Richard shouted, now visibly flustered by a second camera. "That's my husband! This is our house!" Sarah replied. The situation was escalating beyond Richards's control. He had a man he couldn't intimidate, a second witness, and 2 cameras capturing his illegal detention. The 17-minute mark arrived. He looked at David, then at Sarah, then at the 2 phones pointing at him. He had no exit strategy. He had cornered himself with his own prejudice. With a final, disgusted sigh, he made his decision. "Fine. Get your ID." David slowly reached for his wallet and produced his driver's license. Richards snatched it, glanced at the address that confirmed everything David had said, and practically threw it back at him. "Have a nice day," he spat, the words heavy with sarcasm. He turned, strode back to his patrol car without another word, and peeled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights and the siren's echo hanging in the quiet suburban air. 17 minutes. 17 minutes of illegal detention. 17 minutes of baseless accusations. 17 minutes of humiliation. And every single second was now digital evidence. The patrol car turned the corner and silence descended upon the driveway. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the frantic beating of 2 hearts. Sarah rushed to David's side, her hand finding his. His were steady. His breathing was even. But she could see the storm in his eyes, not of fear, but of cold, calculated resolve. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice hushed. "I'm fine," he said, his gaze fixed on the empty street where the patrol car had been. "He never even told me why he stopped me." They stood there for a moment, the 2 recordings still active on their phones. They had captured it from 2 different angles, the close-up from the dashboard, the wider shot from the sidewalk. They had the audio, crystal clear. The questions, the accusations, the 17 minutes of a man being treated like an intruder on his own land. Most people at this point would be shaken. They would go inside, lock the door, and try to forget. They might post the video on social media, hoping for some viral outrage. David Miller was not most people. He walked into his house, Sarah following close behind, and went straight to his home office. He didn't pour a drink. He didn't sit down to decompress. He sat at his desk, connected his phone to his computer, and uploaded the video file to a secure cloud server. He did the same with Sarah's phone. He renamed the files with the date, the time, and Richards's name. It was the precise, methodical work of a pharmacist handling a controlled substance. Then, he picked up his phone and made a single call. If you thought this was just going to be an internal affairs complaint, you're not thinking like David Miller. Who would you call in this situation? A friend? A family member? Let me know in the comments. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Ben, it's David." Ben Carter wasn't just any lawyer. He was the head of the Civil Rights Division at the state's most powerful law firm. A former prosecutor who had switched sides after seeing the injustices of the system from the inside. He was sharp, he was relentless, and he owed David a debt of gratitude. 2 years ago, Ben's diabetic mother had been getting the runaround from her insurance company for a new insulin pump. David had spent a weekend, off the clock, personally navigating the bureaucratic maze and filing the appeals that got it approved. He'd saved her life, Ben had said. "David, it's after hours. Everything all right?" "I'm fine, Ben, but I need your help," David said. He explained what had just happened, not with emotion, but with the detached clarity of a scientist describing an experiment. The illegal stop, the demand for ID without cause, the 17-minute detention, the baseless questions. The recording. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ben Carter was processing. He was shifting from friend to lawyer. "You have it on video?" "Every second, from 2 angles." Another pause, this one shorter. Don't post it online. Don't talk to anyone about it. Email me the secure link to the files right now. I'll watch it tonight. What's the plan, Ben? Ben's voice was different now. It was the voice of a predator who had just caught the scent of blood. The plan? The plan is we're not filing a complaint with Internal Affairs that they can bury in a filing cabinet. We're not asking for an apology. We're filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. Section 1983, violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments. We're going to name the officer, and we're going to name the county for failure to train and supervise. David listened, his expression unreadable. We're not asking for a slap on the wrist, David, Ben continued. We're asking for a number so big it gets the attention of every city council member, the police chief, and the mayor. A number that forces them to change their policies and retrain their entire department. We're going to make them pay for every second they held you on that driveway. What kind of number are you thinking? David asked. Ben didn't hesitate. I'm thinking we start with $18 million. $1 million for every minute, plus a little extra for the sheer arrogance of it. $18 million. The number hung in the air of David's quiet, peaceful office. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. It was the price tag for prejudice. It was the cost of accountability. David looked at the video file uploading on his computer screen. The 17-minute recording was no longer just a personal grievance. It was now Exhibit A in a federal lawsuit that would shake the city to its core. The phone call was over. The war had just begun. The legal notice arrived on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't an email or a phone call. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope delivered by a courier directly to the office of Police Chief Robert Franklin. Franklin was a 30-year veteran of the force, a man who had seen it all. He was 2 years from retirement, trying to steer a department plagued by budget cuts and low morale through the choppy waters of modern policing. He was a good man, a fair man, but he was also a man tired of fighting battles on two fronts, one on the streets and one inside his own precinct. He opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the first page. David Miller versus County of, and Deputy Kyle Richards. He saw the demand. $18 million. He sighed. Another frivolous lawsuit, he thought. Another ambulance chaser looking for a quick settlement. It happened all the time. Then he saw the second page. A single sentence and a hyperlink to a secure cloud server. Exhibit A, unedited video footage of the incident recorded by the plaintiff. Franklin swiveled in his chair and typed the link into his browser. A video player popped up. He clicked play. For the next 17 minutes, he didn't move. He didn't blink. He watched the whole thing, his expression slowly hardening from weary skepticism to stone-cold fury. He saw the illegal stop. He heard Richards's aggressive tone, his lack of justification. He listened to David Miller's calm, correct assertion of his rights. He heard the accusatory questions, the insinuations about David's car and his profession. He saw the arrival of David's wife, and he saw Richards throw the man's license back at him like a piece of trash. When the video ended, Franklin closed the laptop. He sat in silence for a full minute. This wasn't a he said, she said situation. This wasn't a case of conflicting stories or blurry bodycam footage. This was a crystal-clear, undeniable 17-minute recording of one of his deputies violating a citizen's civil rights on his own property. And the citizen wasn't just anyone. Franklin knew who David Miller was. He'd been to the ribbon cutting for the new wing of the youth center Miller had helped fund. He picked up his desk phone. "Get me Deputy Richards' file, and get the union rep on the phone. Tell him to meet me in my office in 10 minutes. The meeting was a storm. The union representative, a belligerent older sergeant named O'Malley, came in hot. "Chief, you know how this works. The kid made a mistake, a little overzealous. We'll put a letter in his file, maybe give him a few days of desk duty. The lawsuit's just posturing. We'll offer them 50 grand and they'll go away." Franklin looked at him, his eyes like chips of ice. "Did you watch the video, O'Malley?" "I don't need to watch a video to know my job is to protect my officers." "Then you're a fool," Franklin said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Your job is to protect the integrity of this department, and that video is a cancer. It's not a mistake, it's a pattern. I pulled Richard's file. 3 prior complaints, all for similar stops, all involving black professionals. All of them were made to disappear by supervisors who didn't want the paperwork." O'Malley started to protest, but Franklin cut him off, his voice rising to a roar. "We buried the warning, so now we get to bury the department. That video isn't just evidence of an illegal stop, it's evidence of a culture. And the plaintiff's lawyer is Ben Carter. You think he's settling for 50 grand? He's going to put Richards on the stand, play that video for a jury, and then he's going to put every single one of those prior complaints on an overhead projector. He's not just suing the deputy, he's suing our entire goddamn department for letting this happen." The chief stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city he had sworn to protect. "Richards is suspended, effective immediately. I want his badge and his weapon on my desk by noon. He is to have no contact with anyone in this department. We are opening a full internal affairs investigation, and we are cooperating fully with the plaintiff's legal team." "Chief, you can't do that without a hearing," O'Malley sputtered. "The union will fight you." Franklin turned back from the window, his face grim. "Then fight me, because you can either fight me or you can fight the Department of Justice when Ben Carter sends them that video. Your choice." O'Malley stared at him, his mouth open. The fight went out of his eyes. He knew he was beaten. The video was a ticking time bomb, and it had landed squarely on the chief's desk. Franklin knew that his only move wasn't to defuse it, but to contain the blast. But the fuse was already lit, and it was about to get a whole lot shorter. Ben Carter knew that a federal lawsuit moved at the speed of a glacier. Discovery, depositions, motions. It could take years for the case to see the inside of a courtroom. And in that time, memories fade, narratives get twisted, and public interest wanes. He wasn't going to let that happen. For 2 weeks, he and David held their trump card. They allowed the county to respond to the lawsuit with their standard denial of all wrongdoing. They let the police union make quiet statements about letting the legal process play out. They gave them enough rope. Then, on a Wednesday morning, Ben Carter gave the green light. At 9 a.m., his office emailed the secure video link to a single reporter at the city's largest news station, a veteran investigative journalist known for her tenacity. The email contained a simple message. No comment. The video speaks for itself. At 11:30 a.m., the news station broke the story online. They embedded the full, unedited 17-minute video. The headline was stark. "I live here. Respected pharmacist illegally detained in his own driveway by county deputy." The internet did the rest. By 1 p.m., the link was the most shared story on the city's social media feeds. The hashtag Justice for David Miller started trending. People who knew David, his patients, the parents of the kids he mentored, his fellow business owners, began sharing their own stories of his kindness and integrity, creating a powerful counter-narrative to the suspicion he faced in the video. By 3 p.m., the story was picked up by state-level political blogs and news aggregators. The video now had over 100,000 views. The comments section was a torrent of outrage. People weren't just angry at Deputy Richards, they were angry at the system that had clearly empowered him. By 6 p.m., it hit the national news cycle. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all ran segments, playing clips from the video. The image of David Miller, calm and composed while standing against his own car, became an instant symbol of quiet dignity in the face of abuse. The story was no longer about a traffic stop. It was about race, class, and the abuse of power in America. By the next morning, the video had 2 million views. The morning news shows were dissecting it frame by frame. Legal experts were explaining the Fourth Amendment implications. The police chief's office was bombarded with calls. The mayor, who had initially issued a boilerplate statement about having faith in our officers, was now in full damage control mode, promising a full and transparent investigation. The pressure was immense, and it was coming from all sides. The State Pharmacy Board issued a statement in support of Dr. Miller. The Chamber of Commerce, of which David was a respected member, sent a letter to the City Council demanding action. A coalition of local pastors and community leaders, many of whom had worked with David on his charitable projects, announced a peaceful rally to be held outside the Sheriff's Department headquarters. The court of public opinion had reached its verdict long before a jury would ever be seated. And the verdict was unanimous: guilty. Deputy Richards, who had been hiding out at his parents' house, became a pariah overnight. His photo was everywhere. He couldn't go out in public. His digital footprint was scoured, and old, racially insensitive posts from his social media were unearthed and splashed across the internet, adding fuel to the fire. David and Sarah watched the firestorm from their home. They did one interview, a sit-down with the local reporter who first broke the story. David didn't raise his voice. He didn't display any anger. He simply told the truth. "I did everything right," he said, looking directly into the camera. "I was polite. I knew the law. I recorded the interaction, and it still happened. My question is, what happens to the person who doesn't have a video? What happens to the person who doesn't know a lawyer like Ben Carter? This isn't just about my 17 minutes. It's about everyone who has ever had to endure this and for whom there was no camera and no justice." His words resonated across the country. The video wasn't just a video anymore. It was a movement. The city and the county weren't just facing a lawsuit now. They were facing a referendum on their very legitimacy. And the pressure to settle, to make this go away, was becoming unbearable. The deposition took place 6 weeks after the incident, in a sterile, windowless conference room in Ben Carter's law firm. The air was thick with tension. On one side of the polished mahogany table sat David Miller, dressed in a simple, dark suit, flanked by Ben and 2 other lawyers from his firm. On the other side sat Kyle Richards, looking pale and thinner than he did in the video, accompanied by the county's lead attorney and a stony-faced union lawyer. A court reporter sat at the head of the table, her fingers poised over her stenotype machine. This wasn't a courtroom. There was no judge, no jury, but in many ways it was more important. This was where the case would be won or lost. Everything said here was under oath, recorded, and could be used at trial. Ben Carter began, his voice calm and methodical. He established the facts: Richards' name, his years of service, his training. Then, he went to the day of the incident. "Deputy Richards, on the afternoon of May 12th, why did you initiate a traffic stop on my client, Dr. David Miller?" Richards cleared his throat. "I observed the vehicle making a turn without what I considered to be a proper signal." Ben raised an eyebrow. "A proper signal? Can you elaborate?" "It seemed abrupt. It caught my attention." "So you had no other reason? You didn't run his plates? He wasn't speeding?" "No, it was the turn." Ben nodded slowly, letting the answer hang in the air. He then turned to a large monitor set up at the end of the room. "I'd like to play a portion of the video recorded from my client's dashboard camera. This is Exhibit A." He clicked a button. The video began to play. It showed the clear road, the gentle, deliberate slowing of the car, and the activation of the turn signal, blinking a full 5 times before the vehicle even began to turn into the driveway. The video was perfectly clear. There was nothing abrupt about it. Ben paused the video. "Deputy Richards, does that look like an improper signal to you?" The county's lawyer objected. "Objection, asked and answered." "I'll rephrase," Ben said smoothly. "Deputy, having reviewed the video, do you stand by your sworn testimony that the reason for the stop was an improper turn signal?" Richards shifted in his seat. He glanced at his lawyer, who gave a slight nod. "My perception at the time was that it was abrupt." "Your perception," Ben repeated. "Let's talk about your perception." He walked to the other end of the room and queued up another video file. This one was from the patrol car's dash cam, which Ben's team had acquired through Discovery. It showed Richards' point of view. It also clearly captured David's turn signal blinking several times before the turn. "This is your vehicle's camera, Deputy. It seems to show the same thing my client's camera shows. A perfectly legal turn." Is there a reason your perception differed so wildly from what two separate cameras recorded? Richards was sweating now. Sometimes things happen fast on the road. 17 minutes is a long time, Deputy, Ben countered, his voice like silk. Let's move on. In your incident report, which you filed later that evening, you wrote that Dr. Miller was argumentative and non-compliant. Is that an accurate summary of your report? Yes. Okay. Ben turned back to the monitor. He played the clip where David calmly asks for the reason for the stop, citing his Fourth Amendment rights. He played the clip where David states he is complying with the order to exit the vehicle under duress. He played clip after clip of David answering every question politely and factually. He paused the video again. Deputy Richards, please point to the part of that interaction where my client was argumentative. Please show me the moment of his non-compliance. Richards stared at the frozen image on the screen. The image of David, hands on his own car. He had no answer. He just sat there, his silence a confession. Ben Carter moved in for the kill. The truth is, you didn't have a reason to stop him, did you? You saw a black man in a nice car in a nice neighborhood, and you manufactured a reason. You initiated a stop based on a hunch, a bias. And when he had the audacity to question you, to know his rights better than you did, you decided to punish him for it. You detained him, you interrogated him, you humiliated him on his own property for 17 minutes. Isn't that what really happened, Deputy Richards? The county lawyer shouted, "Objection! Counsel is badgering the witness!" But it was too late. Ben wasn't talking to Richards anymore. He was talking to the court reporter, creating the official record. He was talking to the county's lawyers, showing them the coffin he had just built for their case. Richards looked down at the table, at his own hands. He wouldn't make eye contact. The bravado he had shown in the driveway was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a man who knew he was trapped. He had been so powerful that day. In this room, under the sworn penalty of perjury and the unblinking eye of the evidence, he was nothing. The deposition was over. The trial was over. All that was left was the surrender. The county's lawyers knew a lost cause when they saw one. The deposition transcript was a disaster. The videos were indefensible. A jury trial would be a public execution, costing them millions in legal fees, only to end with an even larger verdict against them. 2 weeks after the deposition, they called Ben Carter. They wanted to settle. The negotiations were short. Ben started at $18 million. The county countered with $5 million. Ben's response was to send them a draft of the press release he had prepared, announcing his intention to file a motion to unseal the records of Richards' prior complaints and depose the 3 other victims. The county called back an hour later and agreed to the full $18 million. It was one of the largest police misconduct settlements in the state's history, but the terms went far beyond money. As part of the settlement, Kyle Richards was terminated from the sheriff's department. He was forced to permanently surrender his state law enforcement certification, ensuring he could never work as a police officer in that state again. The county also agreed to a federally monitored overhaul of its traffic stop policies and to implement mandatory annual de-escalation and implicit bias training for every single officer on the force. David Miller's 17-minute video became a mandatory part of that training curriculum, a permanent reminder of the cost of unchecked power. The day the settlement was announced, David stood on the steps of the courthouse with Ben Carter, facing a sea of cameras. He looked just as calm and composed as he had in his driveway that day. He held a prepared statement. "Today is not a victory," he began, his voice clear and strong. "A victory would have been me arriving home to my family without incident. A victory would be a world where no one is judged or presumed guilty because of the color of their skin or the car they drive. This settlement is not a prize. It is a consequence. It is the price of accountability." A reporter shouted a question. "Dr. Miller, what will you do with the money?" David looked directly at the camera. "My wife and I will be using the entirety of the settlement to launch the Miller Foundation for Civil Justice. Its mission will be to provide funding for legal representation, public education on constitutional rights, and support for police reform initiatives. I didn't do this for myself. I did it so the next person who finds themselves in this situation has the resources to fight back. My ordeal was captured on video, but the real fight is for the stories that are never recorded, for the voices that are never heard. And so, the story of the 17-minute stop came to an end. Kyle Richards, stripped of his badge and his career, moved out of state, a man rendered anonymous by his own infamy. Chief Franklin, his department now under a microscope, took an early retirement. The city and its taxpayers were left with an $18 million bill. And David Miller? He went back to work. He went back to filling prescriptions, counseling patients, and running his Saturday morning clinic. But now, he was also running a foundation that would change the landscape of civil rights in his state for years to come. He had taken the worst 17 minutes of his life and forged them into a permanent legacy of change. He had turned a moment of profound injustice into a lasting instrument of justice. He was still a healer, but now he wasn't just healing bodies. He was working to heal the deep systemic wounds of the community he loved. So why did this happen? What was going through Kyle Richards' mind? To understand his actions, you have to look past simple malice. Richards was likely a product of a system that taught him a warrior mindset instead of a guardian one. He saw the public not as people to protect, but as potential threats. In his mind, certain people in certain places, a black man in a Lexus in an affluent neighborhood, disrupted his established pattern of the world. This cognitive dissonance, this break in his biased worldview, registered as suspicion. When David Miller calmly and intelligently asserted his rights, it wasn't seen as a citizen exercising his freedom. It was seen as a criminal challenging his authority. The stop was no longer about a non-existent traffic violation. It became a contest of wills. And Richards, insecure in his power, could not afford to lose. His aggression was a defense mechanism, a tool to regain the dominance he felt slipping away. Now, let's consider David's side. What if he hadn't been a pillar of the community? What if he hadn't had the presence of mind to record the encounter? If David had panicked, if he had raised his voice, if he had made one sudden move, the entire narrative could have been twisted. Richards's report would have painted him as the aggressor, and without the objective eye of the camera, it would have been his word against a police officer's. His victory was not an accident. It was the result of a lifetime of discipline and the foresight to create undeniable proof. He protected himself not just with his knowledge of the law, but with his unwavering control over his own emotions. The lesson here is profound and deeply troubling. Justice for David Miller was not automatic. It was exceptional. It required a perfect victim, a respected, eloquent, and composed man. It required perfect evidence, high-definition video from multiple angles. And it required perfect resources, immediate access to one of the best civil rights attorneys in the state. The system didn't work for David. He and his lawyer forced the system to work. The real tragedy is the countless people who endure similar or worse encounters but lack David's unique combination of composure, evidence, and resources. Their stories are dismissed, their complaints are buried, and the Officer Richardses of the world are emboldened to do it again. This case wasn't just an indictment of one officer, it was an indictment of a system that creates and protects them. The $18 million settlement wasn't just compensation, it was a tax on the public for its own failure to demand accountability sooner. So I want to leave you with a couple of questions. What do you think is the single most effective way to ensure police accountability? And what would you have done if you were in David Miller's shoes that day? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters in this conversation. If these stories are important to you, subscribe and share this video. Because the only way things change is if we refuse to look away.